Hello plebs, welcome to Dead by Discussion, where we discuss all things Dead by Daylight. Okay, so I had an interesting thought as I was thinking about, Oni, actually, and just some of his perks. I was thinking about, I can't remember what the fucking perk is called. It's the one that, you'll have to hook somebody, and then he gets all the survivors injured. All the injured survivors become exhausted and get the hemorrhage status effect for 45 seconds. That one. I began to think about, like, how is it that I instantly looked at that perk and knew it was bad? Like, what is it about perks in this game? Like, what's this, like, how are we able to do that? Because, especially his first perk, which was just, Ninshin Tactics or some shit. I can't remember the fucking name. We all were able to look at that perk and instantly determine it was bad. Why is that? Because there is a scale I have determined to figuring out the viability of a perk. Even if you don't, like, have this, like, you have this exact, I believe there is a way that you can quickly look at a set of perks and determine how good they are. Like, what is it about perks that makes them good, bad? And so I determined that it has something to do with math. Not a lot to do with math, but like just barely enough to where you can kind of do these calculations in your head almost to figure out how good a perk is. And so as I started doing some numbers, I thought of I found a trend, which I am more than happy to share with everybody. Okay, so the perks of DBD. One thing that this can also be used is to determine bad perk design. Like, you can instantly look at a perk, and I actually ran pre-patch D-Strike and pre-patch Medal of Man through these numbers, and I was able to determine, like, easily why they were unbalanced perks. It's very easy to determine once you have the system going through your head, which I will be using now in the future since figuring it out right here. So, how will we design better perks? Well, by using this system, you can easily look at a perk and determine if it's too strong or too weak, just by running it through the scale. And it baffles me that we don't have a system like this in play across better players than me, because to me this is a no-brainer. So, okay. I first had the thought that activation conditions should correlate in some degree with the effects that they give off, because I was thinking about Oni's perk, and I was thinking about there has to be some sort of a tier list for activation conditions in game for both killer and survivor. Okay, and then let's talk about what I add activation condition. What I mean by activation condition are what are the standards that you have to set up in order to activate the perk before it becomes active. Okay? And I don't mean something like getting hit for dead hard. Getting hit for dead hard is not an activation condition in my mind, because you don't have to at all set it up. I guess it could be. That was a bad example. I'm talking about like unhooking somebody. Like, that's not an activation condition in my mind, because it's always active to begin with. There's nothing you have to do in-game to help set the perk up. But like, and again, if you want to count that as an activation condition, you can form your own scale. But I don't count that in my scale, at least. Dead hard, I guess you could count getting hit as an activation condition, because dead hard's not active until you get hit, and until you're in the injured state, I guess. So dead hard, bad example. I didn't actually run dead hard through my numbers, so I shouldn't have probably picked that example. So, like, for example, barbecue and chili. Barbecue and chili has one of the hardest activation conditions you can do as killer, when you really think about it. Because, like, when you're just, like, hooking a survivor. Okay. Obviously, when you're killer, you have to go down survivor anyway. That's your win condition. But, like, think about other perks in the game. What's Hex Ruin's activation condition? It doesn't have one. The game starts and Hex Ruin's active. It's already doing things. What is fucking Whispers' activation condition? How do you start getting Whispers off? You don't. It's automatically active. Like, Whispers being inactive doesn't necessarily stop the perk's usefulness. Whispers is actually more helpful when it's fucking not active. So, like, there's nothing. Whispers starts being helpful the second that the game starts. And on a scale of actions for killers, downing a survivor is one of the hardest. Because moving around the map is simple once you get the hang of it. So, like, obviously you have to, like, memorize stuff and all that fun jazz. But, like, downing a survivor is way harder than going into a certain location. So when you really think about it, the activation condition of hooking a survivor is not what makes barbecue and chili a good perk. So there has to be something else. So at first I thought there was just a correlation between their perks and their effects. Because like, oh, barbecue and chilies has a really good effect because it has a hard activation condition. But then that's like, okay, not necessarily, because perks like whispers don't have an activation. They have like an S tier effect, and their activation condition is nothing. And so like what's the deal? So I started running these numbers, and I determined that there has to be something more to it. And I thought that thing was counterplay at first. And so then I ran the numbers, and Hex Ruin was not as good as Whispers on that scale, and I knew that wasn't right, because Hex Ruin is a better perk than Whispers. So I'm like, oh, okay. What's the deal there? What do we have to do? I had to... And then I remembered, not all effects in this game are created equal. There's a certain priority to every effect in this game. Slowing the game down, which is what Hex Ruin does, is more useful than tracking, which is what Whisper does. Every effect in this game has a priority of it. So, I went ahead and ran some perks through my scale. And the way I did it was, I keep saying running the numbers. What does that mean? I gave every perk a rating on the scale of their activation condition, 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. Their effect, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. Priority of that effect, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. And the counterplay, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. And what that means is that the survivors can counterplay your perk a ton. It gets a low. And then I added those up and took the average. And then that's your number. So, like, what are some of the things I did? So, okay, the first perk I was talking about, obviously, I ran Barbecue and Chili. Barbecue and Chili, activation condition is a 1. One of the hardest things you can do in the game when you're playing Killer is hook a survivor. Hardest activation condition. Effect, 10. It's a really good effect, obviously. The priority of that effect, it's a tracking perk, 6. And it doesn't give you a lot of information. I mean, it gives you information, but, like, it doesn't constantly give you information. So its priority is around a 6. Counterplay, you can get into a locker and just be near the killer, which that can also help tell the killer where you are. But, like, it has some counterplay, so I gave it a 4. And so the Barbecue and Chili turned out to be a 5.25 on my scale. Which, I mean, you see a lot of some of these other killer perks, that's not necessarily, that's not bad by a stretch of the imagination. And again, you could honestly make it bounce it up just a little bit. Maybe its priority goes up a little bit. Like there's other stuff you could do, but like that is what my scale gave Barbecue and Chili. Now, obviously, you can. This is how we formulate our opinions on stuff. You could have different stuff than me. This scale is obviously my own subjective opinion. But it's like this is the scale that I use because I think this is accurate. And so that's like, how does that stack up to, let's say, another perk I ran Hex Ruin through? Hex Ruin, activation condition is a 10 because it starts the game active and you don't have to do anything. Its effect is a 10, slows the game down tremendously. Its priority of its effect, that's an absolute necessity, 10. But its counterplay is a 2. Because how many times does Hex Ruin die in 10 seconds? Like, seriously, how many times? So Hex Ruin, so that 2 really hurt it, and it scored an 8. And Devour, I ran Devour Hope through. Activation condition, I gave Devour Hope's activation condition a fucking 0. Because if hooking 1 survivor is a 1, what's hooking 3 survivors? That has to be worse than that, right? Yeah, 0. Its effect, though, I gave a 10, because it's a really good effect if you can get it off. The priority of effect, I gave a 4, because it doesn't really do it. I mean, it kind of adds to your lethality, but like, yeah, kind of, if you can get it off, because of the nature of its counterplay. The priority of its effect is lower, so its counterplay is a 1. So Devour Hope's 3.75. That again. There's my scale, ladies and gentlemen. Whispers, I gave it 10 for activation condition. Effect 6, because and the reason that Whispers has a 6 for its effect is that mid-game Whispers doesn't help you very much, because it doesn't. Whispers is an early and late game perk. It's for the priority of its effect, I gave it 5, because again, like at the beginning and the end, it's really high, but at the mid game, it doesn't help you one bit. So then the average would be 5. And the counterplay, I gave it 10 because I mean you can. I gave it 10 there because like so it's hard for survivors to know you have it. They can't really deduce it when you're playing against them. Like for some builds, survivors can figure out your entire build. When you're running Whispers, they won't be able to guess that last perk most of the time. So like there's not really just a lot of counterplay besides being stealthy. So 10. Whispers 7.75. Again, might be a little bit high, but I really like the perk Whispers, which is funny because I'm not running it in this match. But yeah, now. So like there's just some examples, and okay, sure. I'm sure you taxic guys want me to talk about Noed. Okay, Noed. I gave Noed's activation condition a 4 because all 5 gens popping on you is not a state you want to be in. Granted, you don't have to like do anything to set it up besides let that last gen pop, but like still, that's not a state of the game you want to be in. So that's not a good activation condition. Losing is not a good activation condition, folks. Effect, obviously 10. Priority of effect is a 10. So I'm not gonna fucking give Noed any shit there. But here's the fun part. This is what makes Noed different. I believe Noed's counterplay, because of the nature of how Hex Totems work, Noed's counterplay goes up depending on how many survivors are left. If all 4 survivors are left, that totem's gonna get found pretty fucking fast. And if all 4 survivors are still there, then they can just get rid of it. If you don't have enough pressure on them and shit, like they might have all 5 totems destroyed before the end game even happens. So yeah, if all 4 survivors are still there, the perk has a 3 in counterplay. But if there's only 3 survivors, I gave it a 5 for counterplay, and if there's 2, I have a 7 for it. And if there's 1, I guess it would be like 9. But I didn't even run those numbers because like if there's 1 survivor, you've already won anyway. So more numbers change. But so for all 4 survivors, there are Noed's a 6.75. For 3 survivors, it's a 7.25, and if there's 2 survivors, it's a 7.75. That's because it's a hex totem. That counterplay can't be perfect because of the nature of its effect. And the activation condition, it being losing, is not good. And I guess you could argue that its activation condition numbers could go up too, depending on how many survivors are left. So if you want to run those numbers, be my guest. I'm not. So like, Noed can only get into those stupid levels if, like, it's a situational perk. You see how Noed's numbers can fluctuate? That's why it's not broken, ladies and gentlemen. Because by the nature of what the perk is, its numbers can drastically change depending on the situation. And if Noed doesn't go off at all, I guess it has 0 in all those categories. So if Noed's not going off at all, its activation conditions, Noed would have straight 0s across the board. So by the nature of what Noed is, its numbers can really change. So those are just 3 samples that I gave. And so like, there's Noed, and like, notice something funny about all those. No killer perk got above an 8, and this is the trend that I noticed. The trend is that strong survivor perks are generally a lot stronger. I think that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like they're the side that's favored to win most of these matches. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons is that they have better perks. Like that's not the entire reason. Like they also have an easier game plan, an easier learning curve. Like there's so many things about survivors that make it easier, and I plan to make it a video just about that. What is it about survivors that makes it easier to play the killer? Because there is a reason. There's lots of reasons. But one of the reasons is that they have better perks. So Hex Ruin, it got an 8. That's Killer's best perk, right? That I found. That makes sense to me because I believe Hex Ruin is Killer's best perks. Which is funny because it's only an 8. So, okay, Adrenaline. Activation condition for Adrenaline is a 6. Okay, it's like the reverse of NOED. Yeah, granted, it only happens once, and it's an activation condition of get all 5 generators done. It's a 6 because you're winning if you get Adrenaline off. And again, I guess its numbers could fluctuate depending on how many survivors are left. But like, generally with 3 but like definitely not as much as NOED. And if its effect is a 10, definitely, and its priority of effect is a 10, definitely. There's no disputing any of this stuff. And its counterplay, 10. It's just a free exhaustion perk that you get for completing all 5 gens. So the Adrenaline scored a 9 on my scale, and that makes sense to me. So 9, and again, that's better than Killer's best perks, but we're not even done yet. We got, what else did I run through? I ran Inner Strength through these numbers. Oh, I should probably run Self-Care through. I'll run Self-Care through right now. Inner Strength. Let's run to Inner Strength. Activation condition for Inner Strength is a 5. You gotta run and find a totem. 5. Honestly, that's just me being nice, because for like how fast Ruin seems to die and all our Hex totems seem to die as Killer. Like, you debatably, that should be the inverse. So that activation condition, you're lucky it's not like 8. The effect of Inner Strength is a 10. And I don't know how anybody could say it's not. 10. The priority of its effect. Fast heals that negate Killer perks to slow down the game, like Sloppy Butcher and Thanatophobia, 10. It's an insanely powerful effect. And the counterplay for it, I mean, the best counterplay for fucking Inner Strength is Iron Maiden. And nobody fucking runs Iron Maiden because it's bad. So its counterplay is usually a 10. So there you go. 8.75 for Inner Strength. That's better than Hex Ruin. Fucking what else did I run through the numbers? I ran... Okay, let's run Self-Care through right now. 1, 2. Okay. The activation of... How do you have to set up Self-Care? I guess get injured, but nothing else. So yeah, fine. We'll do that. We'll give it a 9. The effect for Self-Care, we'll give it a 9 because it can be slow, but that's the only thing wrong with it. It can be slow. 9, the priority of effect is a 10, and the counterplay to Self-Care being Sloppy Butcher and shit like that, we'll give it a 7. 35 divided by 4, 8.75 for Self-Care. I think that makes sense. I think that makes perfect sense. 8.75 on Self-Care. It's like, and like, again, you can give or take. This is, as you can see, I think this is a good way to find a perk's general location. You can instantly find it using this method. And, okay, let's run Balanced Landing through. Pre-patch. Because I'm not going to worry about its nerf, because I haven't touched the nerf yet. Okay, for Balanced Land, the activation condition is a 10. All you gotta do is drop off of something. You don't have to do anything else. But, okay, you know what? I'll be nice to you guys. 9.5, because that is semi-specific. So 9.5 for Balanced Landing. Its effect is a 10. Its priority of effect, juking the Killer, is a 10. And its counterplay, like, what's the counterplay to Balanced Landing? I guess it can be dependent. Read it. Because there are some ways to kind of get around it. You have to read them doing it so you can close a bit of ground on them. And Balanced Landing can be misused, so we won't give it. We're not going to give it a perfect score. We'll give Balanced Landing's counterplay a 7.5. 37 divided by 4, 9.25 for Balanced Landing. Maybe a little bit high, but again, it's in that general area right there. And so it makes sense to me. Okay, Dead Hard. We'll do 9 for activation condition. Effect, we'll give it a 10 because it's a nice loop extender. Priority of effect, juking the Killer, it's a 10. Counterplay, you can kind of read it. And you can read it and all that fun stuff. Like, it can be counterplayed. So we'll give its counterplay again. We'll give it a 7. 36 divided by 4. That's looking like a 9 for Dead Hard. You can see, like, using this method, you can easily find that all these perks are in the general locations that they need to be. Let's do Sprint Burst. activation condition for Sprint Burst. You kind of have to, like, we'll give Sprint Burst's activation condition an 8. Because you lose movement speed when you run Sprint Burst, so 8. Its effect, we're going to give Sprint Burst's effect an 8. Because it is an exhaustion perk, you do get distance, but at the same time, the killer, it's the first thing you do. Like, you can't, like, strategically use it in a chase. It's the first thing you have to do every single time. So 8, 8. The priority of effect is a 10, because juking the killer is the most important thing in the game. So 8. I fucked up. 8 plus 8 plus 10. 26. The counterplay to Sprint Burst. I mean, there's not really much you can... I mean, if they use it in the wrong spot and shit, there's not really a lot they can do about it. But like, it's also doesn't have the best effect in the entire world. And, you know, some killers can counterplay it. Like, you can use your powers and shit to kind of catch up and make them misuse it. So we'll give it another 8. So, shit. So it was 8 times 3 plus 10. So that'd be 34 divided by 4, 8.5 for Sprint Burst. Again, that sounds accurate to me. Am I making sense to people with this stuff? I think so. And so here's the juicy parts. Using this system, we can easily decide if a perk is broken or not. Because I also ran pre-patch Decisive Strike and pre-patch Medal of Man through via these numbers. Are you ready for this? Pre-patch Decisive Strike, activation condition 10. I mean, get downed. Okay, but sure. If getting downed, you want to make that a fucking 8. No, not an 8. That might have to be an 8. Because we counted dead hard getting hit as being an 8. So okay. But I remember Decisive Strike used to always be active. And I guess being the obsession kind of could hurt D-Strike's activation condition. So fine, we'll give it an 8 for activation condition. Fucking 10 plus 10 plus 9 for counterplay because you could dribble. 37 divided by 4 pre-patch D-Strike was a 9.25. Again, that was just me being nice. I have on my numbers here that its activation condition was a 10, because you didn't have to do anything to set it up besides get downed. Which, again, it's part of juking the killer. It basically worked as an exhaustion perk. So, like, honestly, because that's how it used to work back in the day. But, like, you had to be the obsession and juking, so, like, yeah, sure. But, like, yeah, its effect and its priority was a 10, and the only reason its counterplay wasn't 10 because it was dribbling. And honestly, you can make that a 9.5 if you really wanted to. So, yeah. 9.5 there for its counterplay, because dribbling wasn't that fucking good. Plus 9, plus 20. 38.5 divided by 4. Then it's a 9.6. So, yeah, that's probably more accurate when it's a 9.6. So, because that perk was fucking stupid, and there was nothing, and then pre-patch Medal of Man, I gave 8 for activation condition, effect 10, priority of effect 10, and then its counterplay I gave an 8. So 36 divided by 4, that's a perfect 9. Like, there you go. And honestly, that's probably being a little nice, because I don't think fucking... I thought that some of these exhaustion perks can stay in the game the way they are. Fucking Medal of Man couldn't. So that's honestly might even be a little bit nice. So like there you go. So like honestly, you see the common trend that survivor perks, the best survivor perks, seem to score 9s and 10s, where the best killer perk Hex Ruin scored an 8. So you see the problem here. So like the survivors generally, yeah, that's the word. Generally seem to have stronger perks. Their best perks tend to be stronger than the best killer perks. And then so you see how if a perk has a high activation condition along with a good effect that has a high priority with limited counterplay, that's how you get broken perks. And those are, so like having high stats in all 4 of those categories is how you get dumb perks that can't stay in the fucking game. And That's also how you can look at bad perks, like you see, okay, activation condition for the perk that lets the killer see vaults, like the Shujin tactics or whatever the fuck it is. Activation condition. Okay, its activation condition is a 10 because you don't have to do anything. Its effect is like a fucking 2 because you should know where all those are anyway. The priority of effect, again, it's like a fucking 2 because you should know where all those are. The counterplay to it is, I mean, it's just run the loops. Like, knowing where the loops are doesn't exactly help you get, so its counterplay is like a 4. 18 divided by 4, it's a 4.5, and that perk is bad and not usable. Do you see the scale here? You can easily not do the calculations. You don't have to do the calculations. You can just picture this stuff manually. You can do this stuff in your head. You don't have to do the calculations to know why a perk is bad. This is just it being listed. And by following this formula, we can see what perks are good design and which perks are bad design. But of course, no one at Behavior fucking does this. And that's why we get shitty killer perks all the fucking time and broken survivor perks all the fucking time. Follow this formula, Behavior, please!